everyone. I'm Anne-Marie from brambleberry.com. Thanks so much for joining me for today's episode on how to make peppermint swirl cold process soap. This project involves making melt and pour soap for your top embeds and then cold process soap and frosting. It takes about 2 days when you consider that you have to make your melt and pour embeds ahead of time. So give yourself enough time for this project. If you're a cold process soaper, you know it's about time to start thinking about the holidays. It is vintage Christmas time at Brambleberry, and so this is one of our vintage Christmas collection fragrances, and I'm excited to work with it today and introduce you to it. So for this recipe, so many of you have been asking for a palm-free swirl recipe mix, and we created one just for you. We have tested this recipe no less than 5 or 6 times just on these particular components to make sure it swirled perfectly each and every time for you. First of all, coconut oil. This is going to add to your lathering. This is going to add to your hardness of your bar. It's going to add to the cleansing ability. Second, we've got olive oil pure in here, and that's our longest lasting kind of trace olive oil. It really is the most pure in terms of how it's been extracted, so it's not going to accelerate trace for you. Then we have our rice bran oil. Rice bran oil is sort of similar to coconut oil in how it acts, except that it does produce a slightly harder bar and it lathers a little bit larger bubbles than, say, straight up olive oil. Then we have canola oil. Canola oil is very similar to olive oil in its properties. It makes for a stable bar of soap, makes for small, fine lather, and in cold process soap, since this one is a really long lasting one, it helps with the longevity of the bar. And finally, we have shea butter. Shea butter, everybody knows, is a moisturizing property, but in this particular recipe, it acts in conjunction with the rice bran oil to help create a more hard, stable bar, almost taking the place of what palm oil would be taking. I hope you give this recipe a try because it's a fantastic, long-lasting swirl mix that also is hard in the shower with great long-lasting bubbles. So to obtain this, what we like to call the perfect red, we have actually created a mixture of 3 different Brambleberry colorants. You'll notice there is an entire testing article at brambleberry.com on how we achieved this perfect Christmas red and why these work, so make sure you check that out. But we're using brick red oxide, tangerine wow colorant, and electric bubblegum colorant, and that creates this beautiful kind of dark red that you get with these gorgeous swirls. It is fantastic, and we think it's the perfect Christmas color. And then finally, the star of the show. New to Brambleberry is this Peppermint Cocoa Fragrance. It smells just like a Starbucks Peppermint Mocha, so it's not overly pepperminty, it's definitely not overly chocolate, and best of all, it lasts a really long time in cold process soap, meaning you have lots of time to work on intricate designs, and it has very minimal discoloring, which is pretty hard to do when you're working with a chocolate or a cocoa fragrance. So the very first step for this is to make our embeds. They are made with melt and pour soap, and they're made with Brambleberry's low sweat melt and pour soap, which means they have less added liquid glycerin to them, so they don't draw water or moisture from the air, so they won't sweat on the top of your soap. This is a pretty big deal, so make sure you're doing a light cold process melt and pour soap or a low sweat melt and pour soap if you're going to make these embeds. So the first step to making these layers is to melt your melt and pour soap in the microwave on 30-second bursts. This was in for about just 1 minute and 10 seconds. Then you're just going to pour a thin layer covering the bottom of whatever mold you're using. In this case, I'm using the Brambleberry 12-bar rectangle silicone mold. So this is just the white melt and pour, and it's our first layer. And by the time I get all these poured, it'll be almost a good consistency to start getting ready to melt the next layer, which is going to be our clear soap. Now that my clear soap is mostly melted, I'm going to take small little bits of this perfect red Brambleberry color block color. So this is the Brambleberry Perfect Red mix, and it's already put into melt and pour soap in a highly concentrated fashion. So that way you don't have to worry about mixing or messing around with any colorants. It's already been done for you. And since this is clear soap, what you see is what you get. So I'm just watching to see if I like the color. I want a little bit more color. So I'm just gonna go ahead and add a little bit more, because remember, you can always add more, but you can't take it out. Once that's fully melted in, it's time to kind of check to see our temperatures here. Just checking this. It seems like it's got a thick enough skin to support that second layer. My temps here are just about 146, a little bit hot, but this skin is pretty thick. Spraying with some rubbing alcohol to reduce surface tension. We want this soap to really be able to layer and stick. You want to do all 4 of these layers just right in a row. So give yourself a good 20 minutes, kind of 5 minutes for each layer to make it work. So now I'm just gently pouring over the first layer, making sure I have a full layer of red because we're making these cute little 4-layered bars. So I'm going to pause right now. I'm going to get rid of all these air bubbles because I don't want any air bubbles to harden into my layers. Just give that a spritz with that. And then finish up all of this. So that way I have a lot of these little embeds for later, because if you're going through the trouble of making them, you might as well have lots. And final one is done. I'm just going to repeat this process with more white and more red. Once these are ready to pop out of the mold, which depending on the temperature you poured, might be 2 hours from now, might be 4 hours from now, but it's definitely just a matter of hours. It's time to cut these however you want. So you can cut little triangles, you can cut little squares, you can cut little rectangles. I really like to do a kind of a whole host of different sizes and shapes because I like to just take the whole handful of this and just sprinkle it on my soap at the end. Before we do that though, just your ever-present Anne-Marie Soap Queen reminder, kids and pets in the other room, we're going to be wearing our long sleeves and our long pants and our closed-toed shoes for safety. And we're going to make sure we have our goggles and that we're working in a well-ventilated area. All right, I've got all my oils melted. Recipe, remember, is down below. I'm going to add my lye water with my sodium lactate gently down the sides of my entire things to try and minimize air bubbles, although it's not possible to do. I'm going to toss this in the sink real quick, get it out of the way. And now it's time to stick blend. Now, once I think I've got this lightly emulsified, I'm just going to stop and hand mix because then I'll know if this is actually traced or not. And I can tell because the color is going slightly back to yellow that it's not traced. Now, I'm going to be separating this into 3 containers, and then I'm going to be adding my fragrance to the containers individually. That will give me maximum amount of time to work with this recipe. Now, this fragrance performs so well that technically I could probably add it to this whole batch, but since I'm on camera and I want to make sure we have enough time to work with things, I am going to add everything separately to the different individual containers. I'm going for just about 3 cups per container here, and then I'm going to pour the rest into my other container for the soap frosting, which we will set aside for later. Then I'm going to get the perfect colors before I add my fragrance. So into our first container here, we're going to add all of our red to get that perfect red. And remember, it's a blend of 3 different reds to achieve this. And I pre-mixed my colorants, and the usage rates are down below in the comments, so make sure you look at the notes for this to get the usage rate to get this bright, beautiful red. I'm going to give this a better stir after I add my fragrance. Then I'm going to do half the titanium dioxide into this first container and then the rest of it into the second container. Since titanium dioxide is pretty heavy, it is of course pre-mixed in a little bit of lightweight oil, just like we always do. I'm just going to go ahead and put it like this and in there and then get all the rest of it and put it out here. Now, to get the colorant to fully mix in, with titanium dioxide especially, I like to stick blend it. It really helps to disperse it. So burping my stick blender, no air bubbles. There we go. This is going to sit to the side for just a minute because this is going to be our frosting. This is our accent color for our bullseye swirl. Gorgeous. And then finally, going to do our red just to get that red fully mixed in. Put this to the side. I can start to see that this is getting a nice bit of thickness on it. I'm going to eyeball my fragrance and do 1/3 into here, 1/3 into here, and 1/3 into here. And then I'm going to hand stir into my frosting, hand stir into my white soap. And this is the soap that we see in the main part of the soap bar, part of what's providing that beautiful swirl. And you can see how gorgeous this soap is to work with. It is still so perfectly fluid and wonderful. This is a dream fragrance to work with if you're a cold process soaper. And it just smells so perfect. It's not too overly pepperminty at all. Now, the bullseye swirl is a pretty simple swirl to do. I'm going to go ahead and pull out an extra couple of whisks to keep on hand. You want to make sure your soap is not separating in here. You want to make sure it stays really fluid, so you always want to have those whisks on hand. First things first, we're going to just pour down the side of our bowl. And I'm going to count 1, 2, 3. And then we go down again here. And 1, 2, 3. And back to our first one, And that's why it's so important to have a fragrance that just really gives you a lot of time to work with it. And I'm also really looking to the side here and saying, okay, how is my texture looking? Is it looking too thick? Is it looking like it's grainy? If it's grainy, I want you to stop and stir a little bit, because remember, we are working with that really thin, fine trace. Mine isn't grainy yet, and it's not going too thick, which is fantastic. If it was getting thick, right now what I would stop and do is I would actually give it a little mix. And I see my titanium dioxide one is getting just a little bit thicker than my perfect red one. Why is that? Titanium dioxide is almost like a little clay. Think about it. Where does titanium dioxide come from? It comes from the earth. It acts like a clay. So even though we pre-mixed it into a little bit of lightweight oil, it is still thickening up just a little bit more than our perfect red, because our perfect red did not have that much earth grade product in it. So I'm going to give this a really quick stir. And now you want to make sure that you have everything set up for your next pour, because that is going to be very important. You can see that we're starting to get a little bit thicker. The layers are starting to hold a little bit better. That is actually a really good thing. So now I'm done with my white. I'm just going to finish off with my red, and then we're going to be ready to pour. When we pour, the key is you take your mold and you pour straight in, but then you go back and forth. And those wispy swirls that you're seeing come out, they really are gorgeous, and you can kind of go up and down and give it a little bit more texture, a little bit more oomph in there. It's so fun to make this recipe, and it comes out with an interesting different swirl each and every time. And now that this is all done, we're going to do our frosting. I take a spoon, and keeping this as wide as possible, I just drop in. And you're gonna have to do this a few times. It does get messy. And the way you frost soap, and we do have lots of soap frosting videos, is you push down and pull up. Push down, pull up, push down. So now that I have it down the middle, you go to the side and you're filling in all these little bits. I am going to put just a little bit of cappuccino mica on the top of this. You could also do like one of the snowflake glitters or like snowflake micas. So now I'm going to take my embeds and I'm just going to drop them and place them sort of strategically, not just let it be a really natural dropping and placement. Gonna put this on a heating pad. I'm gonna spray this with 99% rubbing alcohol to help prevent the soda ash. I'm gonna come back in 2 to 3 days and cut it. So this has been sitting for just about 3 days now. It's pulling gently away from the sides. I can already see it. So now I'm just gonna gently push out sideways. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. And we are out. And now it's time to cut with our non-serrated knife. Whee! And come out, and then you always want to swirl off as opposed to pulling, and look how beautiful that swirl is. It is just remarkably wispy and gorgeous. Now I'm just going to finish cutting these and let them sit for 4 to 6 weeks to fully dry out, harden up, cure before giving away, selling, all of that stuff. If you like the project today, give the video a thumbs up. Be sure to subscribe to the channel. And I hope that you really get to try this recipe, because it is palm free and it makes a wonderful bar of soap. Hard, lathers great, and everything. Until next time, everyone, happy soaping.